Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. As always, Thursday evening, it's time to sit down and discuss matters of importance, interest, etc., to the manufacturing sector. The reason behind today's call, or the subject for today's call, was an article in The Guardian last Saturday, and I suspect it would help if I actually shared. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it, but let me just share the screen. And it really attracted my attention. Why the new era of British... Oh, am I sharing the right screen? Hang on a second. Sorry about that. I may have... Yes, there we go. I was just sharing ourselves. There we go. Why the new era of British fashion is all about the factory. And there's some very interesting names in there. Alice Temperley, Mulberry. And this was a quote that really attracted my attention. 15 years ago, I visited a fashion factory in Nicaragua, which is guarded by a man with a machine gun. This is Deborah B, who runs a knitwear company. The women worked from 8 till 6, and we're only allowed a short lunch break and one toilet break. And this is perhaps the highlighting the ugly truth about a lot of the things that are sold in British high streets as fashion or otherwise, but they may have very dubious origins in terms of ethical production, beg your pardon, and of course also the environmental elements of the fabric and how that was produced. So to join us on this and discuss this tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Chrissy Scott of Beyonder in Glasgow. And Chris and I have been sort of chatting on and off in social media for the last 12 months or so. And it's terrific to have an opportunity to talk with her tonight and have her talk about some of the issues surrounding the wider points raised in the Guardian article, but also just to talk about her business as well and the contribution she's making. So, Chrissy, good evening to you. A very warm
Good
welcome.
evening, Nick.
Delighted you could join us. Can you please tell us what Beyonder, Beyonder, means and what you do?
Yeah, would love to. First of all, thank you all for having me this evening. Happy to chat anything textile, environment, manufacturing. Funnily enough, it's actually, I've just realised it's actually our birthday today. We're 8 years old today. Yay! I know. Through all the trials and tribulations, and we technically, for so many reasons, we should still not exist. But we've only been in manufacturing for about 6 years now. In our first year in manufacturing, we used it as a cost centre. And the purpose for Beyond existing was about encouraging young people and people who are marginalised and not giving opportunities to come into different opportunities. It was about thinking beyond your current paradigm, going beyond the scope and just getting really out of your comfort zone and being willing to take a risk, be seen, do something different, not be afraid to fail. And that's pretty much how we started. And we started doing that with bespoke programming in schools, which was very successful. And that led us on to developing a sewing project where we taught 1,200 Glaswegian youngsters how to sew, which was phenomenal fun. And we were looking at, it really got the bug to look at, well, what had happened in industry? If we were to come into manufacturing, what would that mean? What would that look like? How would that be different? Is there space for us? And so we developed this non-displacement cooperation over competition model that was very much about inclusive growth. So very much from the offset of our manufacturing inception 6 years ago, we've pretty much employed people with a mental or physical health condition that might have a barrier to employment. And we thought that that would be really welcomed in Scotland. And it's just been an uphill battle ever since. But the best mountains are the ones to climb, aren't they? And so it's been really interesting looking at it from what's said a government rhetoric point of view to what's actually available and deliverable on the ground. And we've still got a lot of work to do there, I believe, to bridge that, talking about genuine inclusion, but quality products, infusing them in a space that's profitable and competitive.
But you do a lot of small batch manufacturing for designers,
Yes.
and also for students or pro designers, and also for students who want to be clothes designers. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've pretty much cornered a bit of a niche gap in the market. We're the only people in Scotland, and I think the only people close to what we do and are far superior to what we do are Hillside down south. But we pretty much do anything and everything from design through to prototyping through to small batch, particularly for um, people who want that brand provenance or made in the UK or made in Scotland, or are looking or understand circular economy and are getting more au fait with locality and the supply chain. And we've done a number of really high innovation projects that have been like wearable technology that have included textile components in the design. So yeah, it's been a real learning curve. Some of it brilliant, some of it horrendous, but wouldn't change a day of it. It's been phenomenal.
That sounds like any small business, but the fact that you've got a tremendous social element to what you do makes it all the more laudable, from my humble opinion, anyway.
Thank you.
So that article in the Guardian, then,
Yes.
having read that, and I read it a couple of times, and as soon as I read it, I thought of you, and I
Oh,
thought you
fabulous.
guys, I thought you guys, seems to me, are ahead of this curve, have been ahead of this curve,
Yeah.
and it's nice to say that Alice Temperley, Mulberry, and all that are catching up with you.
Yeah, yeah. Even back in the day, the very start, we'd actually designed and prototyped a bamboo slash recycled plastic dress before Calvin Klein had, but we don't quite have that bandwidth yet in marketing. So, but we take great pride in what we do and being the underdog. And yeah, do you know that article? It's phenomenal to see it being written. We've been waiting for 6 years to see this as more of a modicum of what's in the press, because if you were to look back on how everything happened through industrialization, globalization, and everything being offshored, it wasn't just the machines and the skills, it was the whole supply chain in the textile industry. And when you look retrospectively back at UK and we look at changing industry, whether it be oil and gas, steel, coal, predominantly male-led industries, they've all had restorative investment. We've not been able to find any data in Scotland of restorative investment for women in a predominantly women-led textile industry, which is quite an antithesis and something that we've been shouting quite loudly about for 6 years. But there's still a lot of change to happen there. But the article's phenomenal. There's so much with it that I agree with. And one of the things that I really loved most about it is, so obviously I know of Alice Temperley, but there's some other great manufacturers in there that I hadn't heard of yet that I can't wait to go and explore. And Kate Hills does a champion job of championing Made in Britain and has done stellar work over the years, making sure that factories are listed on Let's Make It Here and it's accessible along with UKFT. But I love it when we still come across new manufacturers that we're not aware of yet. It just goes to show you the depth that we have in the UK and the capability.
Yeah, there's a great company based in Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, which is a town that I absolutely adore from my childhood. Love that place, and it's called Hebtroco, and is the basically Hebden Bridge Trouser Company, and they make very designer sort of jeans and waistcoats and things like that, and it's all a bit hip and hipster and all that kind of thing, but it's bloody wonderful. But the fact of the matter is that their clothes are necessarily quite expensive, And this is the conundrum, and this is the conundrum. It's not just clothing; it's the conundrum of globalization. We've completely but the world has completely educated the consumers of the world to throw things away, to throw away fashion, go and buy a £2.50 t-shirt from Primark and wear it for a day and stick it in the bin. And it's battling against that I sense that you and these British-based manufacturers of textiles and clothing, that's the wave you've got to conquer, is it not?
Well, yes and no. I think what one of the prime positions that the UK finds itself in is that because of globalization and because of global changes that are happening through the UN Sustainable Development Goals and just increased social awareness in and around modern slavery, we're actually starting to find that other countries that were cheaper for manufacturing in the textile industry are not as cheap as they once were. They're raising their standards in humanity, they're raising their labour conditions, and all that comes at a cost. So it actually means that we are now really at a good tipping point of being able to look at, well, is it really cheaper to manufacture overseas when you start to count in the whole supply chain and the logistics and the time frame of getting it here? And I think what a lot of other people do, particularly if they're looking to manufacture overseas, if they're at the start of their journey and they've not even prototyped through to minimum viable products, then there's a whole load of cost that comes with that pre-unit cost. And I don't think there's enough dialogue in and around that. And that's what I used to go head to head on when we have all these amazing incubators and encouraging people to make overseas. And I'm saying, well, yeah, that's fine when you're at MVP stage, but what about pre that? Have you calculated all those costs? It's actually much more cost effective to manufacture closer to home and then explore what are your options for manufacturing in the UK versus overseas.
I must say that obviously this is part of the zeitgeist. Is we had discussions last week. We were talking about rare earth metals and the
Oh,
go into permanent magnets, and the fact that the supply chain is basically cornered, or the market is cornered elsewhere in the world. I think I'm talking about, and about efforts by a group of European companies funded in large part by the EU to develop a new supply chain for rare earth metals. So, in other words, this is a recurring theme of bringing it home, if you like, and that has to be brilliant. In your industry, the one question that I think the article posed quite well, despite applauding the fact that so much was coming back to the UK, was that, is it really sustainable? This is purely from the point of view environmental sustainability. When so much of the fabric that a lot of designers and manufacturers are using has to be produced overseas, and then
does it have
has to be
to?
imported.
Does it
Well, I
does
don't
it
know.
have
I'm
to be?
asking you.
Yeah, it currently is at the moment because everything was offshored. But interestingly enough, that was always part of our early vision right from the start. Was we really and before circular economy became a talking point and a thing, for us that was just about pure localization, how manufacturing was always done, particularly in the UK. I mean, the UK was one of the leaders in global manufacturing in the first place. To have thrown all that out, if you compare the UK market to the Bavarian market, not just that, just a piece of that German market, they never offshored. That's a multi-billion-pound industry. We could have that again, but it's going to take a lot of cohesiveness and understanding. We actually have just partnered with Positive Planet UK, and we are looking at the cotton manufacturing that currently exists in the UK, because there's not actually enough lot of it. And we are looking at identified gaps because we're going to be doing some cotton processing again in Scotland. And so we're looking at that. And then how do we then trial and take that back to more plant-based? And yeah, we might not be effectively able to grow cotton, particularly in Scotland, but down in the south of England, Something to be hothoused down there and solar supported, absolutely could be. We live in that digital technological era where we can actually support and look at different ways of agri-tech to support natural farming practices.
I have not considered, I must confess, the fact that the UK could have its own cotton and cotton growing industry. That's amazing. I guess I don't know. I don't know the economics of cotton and how how many fields of cotton you've got to grow in order to create.
No idea myself yet, but we certainly have been looking into not growing it here initially because we know it can be grown much more easily overseas. But other fabrics, like once we get more deeper into that processing, can we use that for nettle? Can we use that for hemp? And if you look at cross supply chains, India Nature have just set up basically a hemp farming industry down in the borders area, and that's for insulation and bricks and construction. So a big part of what we're interested in is looking at much more natural resources that don't deplete, that still nourish the earth. Can we look at that across industry? So we're looking at textiles, we're looking at construction, we're looking at food industry, we're looking at agri-foods. And can we do that and extrapolate everything from single plants to make sure that everyone has value within that chain?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I must admit that's kind of like the X factor that you can throw into a scenario by saying, you know, if yes, we're bringing a lot of this manufacture home. It doesn't have to be a replication of what we did 150 years ago. There are brand new ways. It's funny. I was. A friend of mine showed me a clothing. I'll see if I can pull it up. It's because it's absolutely hilarious. A clothing brand that makes clothes out of. It says clothes from the future. Yeah, always good.
Is this the clothes that grow with you?
That's it. It's men's apparel, but it's black algae T-shirt.
Cool.
T-shirt. I mean, this is quite.
I'm
This
loving
is
that.
a ceramic T-shirt. 100,000 ceramic particles. Um, I mean, this is just extraordinary. Garbage watch, a watch made out of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a sweater built from old bulletproof vests and firefighter suits that were headed to the dump.
Oh,
I'll
absolutely. And Elvis and Cressy have been doing that for many years down in London. You know, their partnership with the London Fire Brigade and taking their waste fire hoses and turning them into luxury baggage has been phenomenal. And I do believe that they've now got a partnership with Burberry and take their waste silks and use that for linings. If you check out one of our clients, it's a young company called 10T Online. They're based down in the Borders area. They, pre-COVID, they were collecting waste tents from festivals and turning it into streetwear. They actually showcased at London Fashion Week pre-lockdown.
sorry, they were taking what?
Waste tents from that were abandoned at festivals, cleaning them and then turning it into streetwear.
Well, I think that really is part of the whole circular economy thing. I mean, it's one of the people quoted in the Guardian article actually says that that the offcuts, they get their clothes made in a factory, but they take the offcuts as well. It's not just thrown on the floor. They take them and make new things out of them. So I suppose the ultimate question, of course, and this is given that this is consumer facing far more than any of the other things we've been talking about in other conversations, as with rare earths and all that, which is very much a B2B business. This is B2C. Am I right in thinking that the people who are doing this, like the Mulberries and the Alice Temperleys, and of course yourselves, but you were doing it long before them, will the consumer come with you all on this journey? That's the point.
Not not all of them, but I think many will. And I think that's going to be a generational shift change. We're already seeing massive behavioural change in this current generation, particularly around them understanding intersectionality, globalisation, and climate change. So we're seeing people being able to join the dots more clearly in and around how supply chains work, how does globalisation and capitalisation work, can we actually create profit whilst non-exploitative practices? Of course we can, but it takes a much more cohesive approach, and that's what it takes cross-industry and same industry to be more cohesive and partner rather than compete. And I think that's where I think the UK has always been quite good at that, but it's something that I find a real challenge in Scotland. And when I raise this up at ScotScov level and with our agencies, there's still so much national intercompetition instead of drawing on that strength of nation to then be exporting and supporting out in a low carbon approach. But then I've only been championing it for 6 years, so I reckon we might be heard within the next 6, because these things take time apparently.
Yes, I think it's very much a dripping tap on a piece of granite. It eventually makes a hole in it, but it takes a long time. Okay, Michael, do you mind if I ask you to jump in, because you made a comment about the price of you've been working with textile manufacturers, and I'm going to put you on the spot and bring you into the conversation.
No problem at all. I worked in West Yorkshire with some textile manufacturers, weavers. I mean, we still make some of the, they would still say we still make some of the finest cloths in the world in West Yorkshire, the woolens and the worsteds for jacketing and coating, etc. And obviously with a massive, obviously back in the day, Victorian times or even before that, we got these great big mills, etc. The dark satanic mills around Bradford, etc. that were churning out, miles and miles of cloth, etc. But it struck me when I was working with them, and they're very much working in the top end of the marketplace. So they're not now supplying cloth because they can't produce currently. They don't have a business model that allows them to produce a cloth. Really, they're on the edge of being able to produce for a suit that goes into Marks and Spencer's at Marks and Spencer's kind of cost. Mm-hmm. They're very much at providing for tailors, and then their cloth goes to the Middle East, to the Far East, where people will spend an amount of money on a suit or whatever. They were selling at 30-35 pound a meter for the cloth, and maybe at the bottom end of what they could produce, we're at 20 pound a meter, and yet the cloth that goes into a pair of trousers that you might buy in Next or somewhere like that is being produced in China or wherever it's being produced at £1 a meter. So there's such a massive disparity at the moment between, now obviously, can we get back to us ever being able to produce, or we've got to have people realise that going to your people in Hebden Bridge to buy the trousers, they do cost £100 for a pair of trousers instead of £29.99 or £19.99. But that's because of the miles and it's because of the quality. But I mean, these products that are being sold at £1 a meter, it's not natural fibres anyway. It's polyviscose fibres as well. You've got the environmental cost of producing those sorts of, in effect, well, the plastic fibres, aren't they? They're non-organic fibres. So, we've got to try and get to the bottom of that, and we've got to be able to get the material as well. We could probably get the wool. I don't know whether we get enough wool. I don't know the dynamics of whether we can generate enough wool in this country to create all the wool for all the wool trousers that we need in the world, or the wool jackets in the world. But all the cotton for all the shirts, etc. I mean, it's a struggle, and certainly people will need to pay for it. So I just thought, I didn't know whether that was an interesting insight into how much you pay for a yard of fabric that goes into a pair of trousers compared to what we can produce in this country.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on, Michael, and that's the thing. I think we're not Would I love to see us doing everything here? Of course, that was the vision, that was the dream. You know, let's have it all here. And if we're really true about circularity and climate change, then that's what we'd all be striving towards anyway. But I think we have to be pragmatic and real about what can actually be done here, and really be careful about choosing our wins. And that means that we need to take both a macro to a micro look at global textile industry. What is being produced where? What does it make more sense that is made there? I would really like to see us leading again, particularly natural plant-based yarns, because I think that's where we can really dominate and lead again. And if we bring in automation to create more jobs rather than lose jobs and replace jobs, and look at digital capabilities where we can do that, we're in a whole new world now. And I think that's where if we're not quick off the mark now, we're not going to have the chance to even have that bite of the cherry, because I don't know about down south or like Wales, but it's like molasses up in Scotland. Like, we were first asked when we came into manufacturing, how on earth do you think you're going to do organic t-shirts and people are going to buy into that? Because that's what the future is and that's what people want. And we've stuck by that, not just by what we're selling, but about that whole ethicality and transparency in the supply chain. And we're far from where we want to be. We're nowhere near where we want to be, but we've got skin in the game. We've financed it. We knew that unless somebody's willing to take a risk and start pushing some boundaries, it's just going to be the same old. So I think we've got to start looking at that. I think plant-based right up and down the UK, we've got some real opportunities, but especially as due to Brexit, there's change and challenge happening anywhere in and around farming. So that's about being really cohesive with the farming industry and working directly with them to see who's got what land, how do we all work together to make this more cooperatively work economically for each other. Why not?
I think from my perspective, I think, as always, we can always, in all these things, find lots of reasons why it won't happen. You know, we could have looked at that, at people wearing seatbelts and smoking 25 years ago, can't we? And we're now at a place where we recognise the problems that we've got, the problems of that, the problems of seatbelts, the problems of cars. You know, I've just looked at a new lease for my car, and do I go electric or not? And, you know, you're just on the edge of, and, you know, there's a news articles about hydrogen and whether it's blue hydrogen or green hydrogen or purple hydrogen. You know, you know, but we've got to start making those kind of moves. And there's a brand in Leeds called Harrison Spinks, who I don't know whether you guys are aware of, who make mattresses. And they started with the guy, I think it was the Spinks guy, who started by taking his own sheep and using his own wool to make the top of the mattresses, and they make high quality mattresses. They obviously hasn't got enough sheep to do that now for the production that he's done, but he's been able to produce a product that people want to buy, but it is at a price point. And I think that creativity of I think the textile industry's probably been in survival mode, and they're at a individuals level, lots of individual companies trying to survive rather than a cohesive. But it isn't that what we've been saying about all forms of manufacturing, and probably a drum that you've been banging for weeks and months and years, Nick.
I have to say that element, what you said, Michael, was absolutely bang on. In fact, I was about to articulate it before you did, because it was that point that Chrissy made about this sense of stasis that there is in the political and economic establishment, who just accept that because people like shopping, pardon me, brand name alert, at Primark, that is the way it should be. The point about the trousers made in Hebden Bridge by Hebtroco is that, yes, they may cost £100, but they'll last you forever. You won't have to throw them away. But of course, the mindset has to change some way. But I absolutely accept what Chrissy said. There is a generational change in the way things are happening. And I think that consumerism that sort of so dominated the 90s and 2000s. I think that is on the wane, or should I say it may not be on the wane, but I think there's a very strong alternative coming up on the inside track. Stephen Murphy, you've had your hand up for a few minutes. I beg your pardon, but you have a point to make.
I just wanted to ask Michael, with his knowledge of some of these high-end producers, to what extent do you think they've really tried to take waste out of their organization? So in other words, obviously you don't want to crudely cut costs by using cheaper materials or anything like that. But inevitably, unless you've made, in my experience, whatever sort of organization you are, unless you've actually tried to reduce wastes over probably sort of 5 and 10 year periods, you know, then you've probably got a lot of waste. There's probably a lot of opportunities within your organization, particularly with digital technology coming in. So I just don't know those industries. So I just wanted to ask you the question straightforwardly, you know, to what extent do you understand that they've really gone for waste within those?
Just to give you an idea of scale, the business that I worked for had gone from owned probably 6 or 7 mill and cloth brands, which each one would have been set up in those times by a guy that set up a mill. And they now are manufacturing all their stuff through one manufacturing operation, a single mill. That gives you an idea of the scale that they're going. So they've obviously tried to take and find the most efficient way of doing it. The new modern looms are now faster really than one that was 20 years ago, and they are looking at their maximizing their production in terms of, you know, running pieces off, but they've got to make so many pieces and they've got to run them, and the setup for the machine, so they need to run it so that they produce 10 pieces, etc. From a weaving perspective. Are they, if I was to give them a score out of 10 in terms of digital forward thinking, I'd probably give them a 5 at best in terms of, you know, they're probably, you know, probably a bit more stuck in the 1960s, 70s and 80s rather than the 2000s and the 2030s. But it's a fairly simple process of somebody designing and putting a template together and then running the weave and the weft and the getting my weaving terms up. This is where I'm up against the edge of my capability as a marketing man, but putting it together and running the looms and having it run through, and they're out there trying to survive at these brands, and they've amalgamated brands together because brands as small businesses can't survive. So they bring all the brands together and they're running them all through one production facility across multiple brands, and businesses that would have had multiple mills, i.e. multiple mill buildings, are now down to just one person who represents the brand selling it, and it's all being manufactured under one global. So yeah, it's very difficult. I wouldn't say that they're miles ahead, but equally I wouldn't have said that they're stuck and they don't know what they're doing, and that they're still, you know, turning something with a handle by hand.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of that going on, and I think that's also part of the challenge, is understanding the machinery and the capability. Like, I have this conversation with my clients all the time, and I say, look, you really have to understand, when we get mechanical failures, it's because our machines are not running to their full capability. If you've got some industrial machinery and it's not running its full cycle, then that's when it's at its worst. And I think we really need to talk about the whole inner workings of manufacturing. And I think manufacturing itself is such a fantastic language that whether you're in manufacturing or not, everybody should know how it works. Let's get everybody sigma'd.
I thought it was interesting in the article they were talking about the fact that in one of the factories, I'm not certain which one, I was just been trying to look for it, that they still had ledgers sitting on the desks. There weren't that many computers around it, and I fully understand Michael's point about they've obviously done a lot of streamlining in that particular business. I wonder I wonder what would be lost and what would be gained if the industry became a lot more 21st century, Chrissy.
I can give you an example from LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, and they pulled in a load of just for a particular name, a load of Six Sigma people for waste reduction, and they pulled them in from Michelin, I think, because I think Michelin are really pretty good at this sort of thing, and they did a huge amount of stuff. In other words, even just stuff like cycle time for handbag production. And what they found was that the designers were putting things into the handbags, into the design, that were a real pain for the craftspeople to do.
Mm-hmm.
So what they went back and said, well, to the craftspeople, what can you do easily? And the craftspeople said, oh, we can do some real funky stuff. So they turned it around and said, okay, can the designers use this really nice funky stuff that's easy for the craftspeople and still looks great? And so they did that. So they also did things like moving the craftspeople and the designers in offices next to each other, instead of the designers living in some ivory tower somewhere, and the craftspeople stuck in a dark room somewhere, you know.
Absolutely.
So they improved a lot of that interaction that cut their new product introduction cycle time down by orders of magnitude. So my point to Michael is unless you've actually really looked at the nitty-gritty end-to-end cycle time, almost from product concept to recycling, and looked at the total manufacturing process, unless you've looked at it in a lot of detail, there is usually so much waste in there that can be removed without in any way sort of just focusing on saving pennies. It's really by using the skills of your people and working better. And there are plenty of opportunities in fabric industries to do that, I'm sure, because others have done it. It's not new. Like LVMH, Total High End, they have done it.
I think, I'm at the edge. My experience in that business that I was talking about was purely yarn to finished fabric. So no fabric production and no manufacturing production. It was purely they're purely weaving businesses, and then they're selling the fabric on. I did work for a garment manufacturer who made some very specialist and high-end personal protective equipment for in a marketplace, and for sure they're constantly looking at the market and going, how do we make this jacket better? It's a very technical product. It's like a firefighter garment, but not a firefighter garment. But how do we make it better, and how do we design it so it's easier to make and better to wear, etc.? And so, I take that, Stephen, and I'm not, I'm not in any way, shape, or form defending businesses that were quite, panelled rooms and boardrooms and things like that. So
there are companies like Scotland's Keeler who make outdoor gear, who's to my mind their ethical credentials benchmark with the likes of Patagonia, and they still manage to make really, really good jackets for outdoor use for 200 quid, and they make a profit. So that there are, and that was by using modern materials, keeping apprenticeships going. They patented a lot of things like the fabric welding, because not for outdoor gear, but for surgeons' gowns, because it minimises the stitching that bugs grow in and things like that. So that there are companies and organisations that either A, taking waste out, or B, like Keeler, using modern materials, modern methods, making great products. And to my mind, I think their big issue is marketing. Nobody knows how great they are and how the products are. And American companies are absolutely brilliant at selling themselves, where ours are.
Well, thank you for raising that, Stephen, because I hadn't heard of them. Where are they based?
Glenrothes.
Brilliant. So, I would really like to get an introduction if you can make that happen. I'm working as part of a kind of global team looking at international trades, and I really am championing UK brands so that we can get particularly our excellent brands that don't have that high profile. Like, we don't market ourselves because we don't have the capability to. We're always 3 months ahead. We've always got a stock book ready to go. So until we get that digital capability that allows us to increase our capacity, we can't actually advertise, which is crazy. And so I'd be interested to know what and where their marketing challenges are, because there's so many people just willing to speak out for other manufacturers and highlight them, showcase them. It doesn't cost them anything.
One thing I thought it was interesting in what Steve was saying there was that, and this came across very strongly again in that article, Chrissy, was that it's the designers who actually have the motive power in this change. The manufacturers have I wouldn't say they've been passive, but the change is coming about because designers are understanding how a new generation is thinking, and also they're having their own ethical second thoughts, if you like, about both the fabric they're using and, of course, the conditions under which a lot of these things have been made. So, I mean, is that your sense as well, that the actual manufacturers don't have a great deal of agency in this change? It's the designers who have the power.
Yes and no, because at the end of the day, unless designers can speak quite avantly with the manufacturers, they're not really getting anything made. So there has to be that mutual respect and support for what they're going to do. Certainly for us, we will pretty much design, prototype and support anyone to market, but we will only actually work with brands who are on that sustainable, ethical journey, because that's where we want to be and that's where we are positioned as a small batch manufacturer. When we were struggling to get a foothold in Scotland and explain that by supporting us, it actually supports the designers of Scotland, but they're giving designers grants, but they're not supporting the infrastructure part, which I think is a big challenge. And I think we need to get the UK to get their head around that a bit more, much more cohesive down south, I believe, and much more support down south than there is for textile manufacturing than there is up in Scotland. I know that for a fact. I've been at the rough end of it. And we champion anyone in the UK who's manufacturing. We think it's absolutely crucial. But yeah, I think some manufacturers are starting to adapt, and I think you're still going to see bad practice regardless. That might never change, but we can't be frightened of not being up for the battle.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm unsighted in terms of support structures. I know that you'll get differing points of view, pardon me, about support structures. A lot of people will say that large companies who've got visibility will attract large amounts of government support, but SMEs, particularly the smaller ones, they don't get a sniff. And that's very much something. Michael, did you have your hand up, or were you just applauding?
No, I'd like to. If you, I'm both. Of course.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Go for it.
Just from a. I mean, you used the word designer, but I think what you really meant was when you talk about design, you talk about a designer brand. It's really the brand owner that makes the decision, not the physical designer. But it's a strategic. Keeler, in developing garments like this, have made a strategic decision that they believe in a marketplace that provides these products, there is an opportunity and a place for us to provide these products at this price point. And that's what marketing's about, understanding what your position is. You know, as a marketing consultant, goodness me, hopefully I can articulate that. That's what it's about. Definitely. Finding your place. What is your promise that you're making? And we're saying, okay, and then as a brand owner, like our PPE people, they're going to the manufacturers of fabric and saying, we now need something that has these properties that can do this, but then is also that is also 20% lighter and 10% more breathable, or whatever it needs to be that drives the market. But Keeler, there's an interesting paradox here about whether Keeler can drive the market or they're responding to what the market wants. Mm-hmm. And you need a lot of money to change people's minds about what the right thing to do is. You know, you look at Tesla has driven the market in electric cars, really, but it's taken a lot of money to change people's attitudes towards electric cars. Government hasn't done it really, has it? They've not invested the money to change people's minds. It's people seeing Tesla cars, people owning Tesla cars, and people say they're quite good at these Tesla cars now, and then seeing, oh, and they're actually quite fast and they perform quite well, and you can actually get a long way in it. You know, people are going, I've now got a green jacket that performs just as well as another breathable fabric jacket, and it wicks as well as it, and it's not 4 times the price and all the rest of it. And you know, I look at Keeler and I'm looking at this and thinking, well, there might be some stuff on here I might want to buy, but this is how it goes round, isn't it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so.
I think change is one of those things that seemingly takes forever, and it happens in tiny steps to begin with. And then somebody much cleverer than I did said something along these lines. Then it happens all at once. And I think that's the Tesla point, is that, as you say, they led, a brand invested and led on this. And then governments raced to catch up. I think what Chrissy was saying about the generation coming through is absolutely bang on. I think that this has meaning anywhere from, you know, clothing right the way through to politics, society, what have you. Sometimes it's easy to overstate this, Chrissy. So do tell me if I'm getting over the top on this.
No, I think one of the beautiful things in and around manufacturing as a core industry is that within the cross-industry perspective, there's so much to learn from each other, especially in and around how metallurgy works, and can any of that be transposed into the textile industry and vice versa. So, for example, a lot of what I do is reverse engineering process or looking at different perspectives. And I think because I didn't come from a manufacturing background, it's allowed me a different perspective. Because people who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years go, can't do that, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, why not? That's where, you know, we have that capability now. Why are we not adopting that and using that? Because it creates more jobs and it's more cost effective. And being able to use like software for different methodologies, where it was always just the big manufacturers that could afford things like that. Things are becoming more affordable, more accessible to support micro and SMEs. And I think from a market perspective, I think we just need to keep championing each other and speaking about, oh, so-and-so does that. Like, I spend probably half my week signposting people to other manufacturers. We are not always the right manufacturer, quite often we're not. And we'll say, we will never turn anyone away. We will always say, if we can't do it, we'll help you find someone who can. And I think we need to get more of that dialogue up and down the UK and draw on each other's strengths and be looking at what's someone else's waste. Can that be someone else's raw material? Because it doesn't come from that standard waste stream model, because it's linear, we need to look more circular around that. And people talk about closed loop systems and circularity. That's great. But see, as soon as you introduce logistics, there is no circularity. So we need that to actually have an adaptable, flexible infinity model that sits underneath circularity to support true circularity.
It's the phrase of the evening is why not? And I think why not is just a brilliant way of approaching this. I'm going to put Mark on the spot, Mark Amphlett. So, because what you said there, Chrissy, about the availability of a lot of these software, supportive software processes, it really will, music to Mark's ears about their availability to smaller companies, because that's exactly what you do, Mark. And I think that is a message that needs to be spoken loud and clear.
It is, and I'm fortunate that I've spent a lot of time in the past working at managing an injection molding company, so dealing with product design all the time, trying to find the best way to get those products out there. And whilst I was at that company, I've developed some software as well, which is now going out to market to help the process involved in manufacturing and all the process involved in getting the factories to run smarter and quicker. And yeah, we come up against, I was with a customer yesterday in Manchester, and she was saying, you come up against likes of SAP, you come up against likes of Sage Manufacturing, both of which are amazing companies. But the software I developed is specific for a specific market. And SAP and Sage don't have that insight. They don't have the knowledge I have. So I'm not going to get as many customers as SAP or Sage. There's no way. I'd be happy with 20 or 30 customers in a 5-year period. That's what my target is. But I've got a real passion to help these manufacturers do things the best they possibly can, make themselves more efficient. And just open up to the general manufacturing environment isn't that easy. People don't know where to go. They don't know where to look. And, you know, a manufacturer like yourself, Chris, you design the stuff great. You want to make some of it. And if you can't make enough of it, you want to recommend it to someone else. And you want that process to flow smoothly, so you know, everybody wins. I think I've got a great opportunity there.
You know, absolutely. And I think I had this conversation actually with Stephen, about a month or so, Stephen, didn't we, with the chat? And I think when I think about things that I've invented, just because I had to know, because I didn't know what was easily accessible out there, I think that as new manufacturers and micro manufacturers are starting up, we really should have a baseline toolkit that everyone can access that's a shared cost piece. And I think that's something that Innovate UK could certainly be active in leading on, because it's just a bit of reverse engineering. If we actually create that bit of software that can do A to G, because that's all as a micro, that's all you need at that stage. Let's make that, but let's make that affordable and accessible for everyone to have. Because when I think about productivity costs and how much time and money that I wasted because I had to reinvent the wheel because no one had a wheel to give me, then right. I think if we're getting right down to the basics and the nitty gritty, I don't think we're having those conversations enough. So I think Steve, we should chat after this, Mark.
Perfect. Happy with that.
Steve, you're in the business of helping manufacturers become much more efficient as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll give Sarah Duff a quick nod to start with. You know, Sarah Duff of this parish has what looked to me to be good products within the ERP and MES sphere. So in other words, just to be able to answer simple questions, you know, how much inventory you've got, when will this order be out? That you can start to do things with those products. You can start to do things in seconds rather than hours. And once you can do that, you actually realize there's a whole stack of questions that you can use software for that you didn't realize needed answers. And it's the same with the products that I have, is that for statistical process control, FMEA, you find that although they're well used by big companies, I don't think they always use them that well, but now the software is available. It's to my mind, it's very, very cheap. It's not difficult to use, and there is absolutely no reason why a small company with even a £1 million turnover can't embrace it and be able to say to their customers, you know, we're using these more advanced techniques that you've asked us about. We can give you the capability indices. We can demonstrate with this data how our processes are under control. And whereas when I was a lad, it would have taken, you know, I had somebody who would do half a day producing that data for a big company. Nowadays, the junior technician's gopher would do it in 2 seconds. So and this software, you know, you're probably talking an investment of it could easily start at, I know people are starting about 5K. So in other words, it's almost too cheap. It's almost like people don't even believe it's going to work. But it's been developed over 40 years. It works for big companies. So, you know, I'm talking about statistical process control, failure modes and effects analysis, tools that are typically used in high tech. There's no reason why a small SME of 2 or 3 people can't afford that sort of tool and move themselves right up the food chain. It's the same with Mark's molding process control. There's loads of molds out there. You don't have to do an awful lot of improvement with a tool to wonder why. Well, it looks like it's paid for itself in 3 to 6 months, and that's really pretty common.
Exactly
think-
right.
But it's
I kind of
getting in
see,
there.
I kind of see companies working with Excel spreadsheets and Word documents that crash all the time, compared to something which has a full traceability from start to end. It's amazing for them. They just don't understand that it's out there, especially not the sort of price it is.
Yeah.
I think you're sort of encapsulating the argument that has been made to UK manufacturers from Made Smarter and many others for quite a while now. And Chrissy, obviously it's very germane to what you're doing, but we've only got 5 minutes left. I want to just get a sense of your optimism around your particular sector, and given the way you work, which I think is quite particular, and I wouldn't say unique, but it's definitely particular. Do you get a sense of optimism about the future of the UK clothing manufacturing industry, the textile industry itself, as Michael has been
Absolutely.
describing? Yeah.
Absolutely. If there's two things that we're very much reliant on, it's food and clothing, and not just textiles. It's everything. It's not just in apparel. It's in everything we sit on. It's in everything we move, we touch. It's everywhere, right through to the automotive industry. There's so much that can be done if we're willing to look at it from different perspectives and look at different types of partnerships and sharing different processes and learning that happens across industry. I think there's still so much scope for that, and I think Made Smarter is going to be a huge piece of leverage in making that happen, especially like when all the catapult centres were built. Like, that for me was just fantastic to know that we've got a specialist centre for everything up and down the UK. I think we really need to be making sure that we're exploiting that as much as possible, because that's a wealth of knowledge and capability we're sitting on. I'm never out the AFRC because it's on my doorstep, and I probably would have given up a long time ago if it wasn't for the Advanced Forming Research Centre, because they very much have the same attitude as I do, although they specialise in metallurgy. They're like, it's manufacturing. Of course we'll look at it. Nobody does textiles in it. Let's look at it. Brilliant. And so, yeah, I'm hugely optimistic. Pre-COVID, had we had the backing from our economic and environmental agencies in Scotland that we had been asking for, if we'd have got that digital support pre-COVID, then at the start, right through the pandemic, we would have soared. We'd have quadrupled our turnover. We would have doubled our staff team. As it was, because we didn't get that support for our modular manufacturing model, even though we've proven it, we are now having to do a full rebuild, and we'll get there, and we will. But we were having to turn away contracts at 200k a pop because we didn't have that capability during that time.
Yeah.
So
I
you just need
think
to use that to the advantage. No, you didn't back us then, but you must now.
Yeah, we keep running up against we keep bumping up against this issue of unresponsive, unimaginative, etc., centralized government thinking, and we always will until we change the world. Hey, everybody, who's up for a revolution?
Yes.
Great
Bring the
stuff.
wine.
Well, I'm gonna say goodnight to everybody who's been on the call. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. It's fantastic. Chrissy, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure because, as I say, we've been chatting on and off for over a year now, and to be able to get you on Kaizen Central was a great pleasure, and your insights and your enthusiasm are just wonderful. So you've got the. You know how to come back every week. We're here, you know.
Oh yeah, you know, it's one of those things I've been meaning to. Thursday night was always my start of the weekend, but that's not been for a wee while now. So yeah, this will be my new Thursday night thing now that David's away looking after the folks in Spain. So this is it. I've no more husband wine and peanut butter ice cream. So it'll be Kaizen time now.
On that note, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Splendid. Thanks again, Chrissy. Good night, everybody,
Thanks, everyone.
and see you next week.